Every 90 seconds, someone is reported missing. Many return to their families, but for others, something has gone seriously wrong. A young woman has disappeared on her way home from work.
We started ringing around hospitals, our friends.
I thought, oh my God, something's happened.
That's when I went into panic then.
This is no ordinary missing persons inquiry.
It was a very, very unusual investigation.
What happens in the police investigation that follows?
There were human hairs trapped in the knot in the electric flex, and it also had bite marks in it.
What happens to the family at its heart?
I would rather be the mother of a murdered child than be the mother of a murderous killer.
When missing turns to murder.
Helen was a much wanted baby. When I got married, I couldn't wait to be a mum. And when she was born, she was just amazing.
She was mischievous. She'd take the mickey out of everyone.
She loved her family. Michael, her brother, when he was born, he wasn't my baby, he was her baby. And she always had that nursing instinct in her, you know.
I did meet Mary, and we obviously started getting, if you want, into a serious relationship. She had the 2 children. She was divorced, I was divorced. I always said that the children came first with Mary. I think Helen, initially, building up a relationship was a little difficult, but once you got to know her, she was a great girl, full of life, you know, she had bags of friends.
She was never cheeky. She was always full of fun, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And if he had anything on that she liked, she'd borrow it.
Yeah.
We did have nights out together, her and her boyfriend, Mary and myself, and now just had a very good relationship. And she always said she was looking forward to being a bridesmaid at our wedding. And sadly she wasn't.
"22-year-old insurance clerk Helen McCourt is looking forward to a night out with new boyfriend Frank.
Helen and I worked together in the Royal Insurance, and she phoned me up numerous times during the day because she was going out with a new boyfriend that night and she was really excited. And she kept phoning me up saying, "Do you think I should wear this outfit?" Then she phoned me back 10 minutes later, "I've changed my mind, what do you think of this outfit I should wear?" And she was just so excited about going out that evening.
She was just her normal self, you know. She caught her bus, her train, she went into work. She'd rung me 3 times from work.
She had planned to meet her mum in the city centre for lunch, but the weather was so dreadful that was cancelled. However, the rest of the working day continued as planned, and the intention was she was going to be coming home at tea time, at the normal time, because she had a date with her new boyfriend at about 8 o'clock.
And it was terrible weather, it was really, really windy. So if you didn't have to go out, you wouldn't really have gone out that night. But obviously she was looking forward to going out with a new boyfriend, so she was going to go no matter what the weather was like.
And it got to about 20 to 6 and she still wasn't there. And I heard on the news that the trains from Lime Street to Wigan had been delayed because a tree had blown on the line. So I relaxed then because I thought, oh, that's the reason why she's a bit late.
And then when I got here, Mary said, "Oh, Helen's not got home." But with the weather, immediately thought, well, there's bound to be some disturbance, you know, with public transport because she travels.
But as the minutes ticked by and Helen failed to arrive, she became increasingly concerned.
And so we waited and waited. Michael was working. And when he came in, I said, "Is Helen with you?" And he said, no, Mum, I've not heard from her. So that's when I went into panic then. If she missed her train at Lime Street Station in Liverpool, she'd go to the call box and ring me and say, Mum, I've just missed my train, she'd say, so I'll be 15 minutes late.
Helen was always making Mary aware of where she was, what time she'd be home. She would have rung her mother because that's what she did.
Concerned that Helen might have suffered some kind of accident due to the high winds that were battering the northwest at the time, she became increasingly concerned that something serious had happened.
We started ringing around hospitals, her friends.
I thought, oh my God, something's happened. She must have had an accident on the way home because the weather was so bad.
We couldn't understand if she had a call in anywhere because she was so adamant about getting home.
Eventually they decided, after drawing a blank, to retrace Helen's journey to see if there were any incidents on the route back towards Liverpool that could account for her disappearance.
Frank, Barry and myself went in the car with Royal Insurance, tracked from the Royal Insurance to the underground station, no sign of her. To Lime Street Station, checked with the railway people, yes, the trains were still running fine. And that's when I think we started worrying. And we immediately said, right, well, we'll go around to Copper's Hill Station and report her missing.
When a person is reported missing from home, depending on the circumstances, for example, if a person went out to the pub for a night with a gang of people and didn't come home and the parents reported them missing, it might be unusual for the parents, but there might be background circumstances why they didn't come home. For example, they met somebody, gone back to their place. So initially, most inquiries, you would say, leave it for 24 hours or so to see if they came back. And if it didn't, then depending on the circumstances of how they went missing, then the case would build, the approach to the missing person would build. Well, we knew the basic facts, that she'd been going home, because we knew she was due to go out, and she just hadn't turned up. So those circumstances were very, very unusual.
We just expected to hear that she'd be found somewhere injured. Obviously there's no mobile phones in those days, so communications took a little longer to get through. So we just assumed she'd be found in a hospital somewhere, and everything could come to light.
And the police, to their credit, responded extremely quickly, considering it was an adult and she'd been missing for so little time.
I was getting really upset by then, because it was coming up to near 10 o'clock at night, and I didn't know where she was, and I've always known where she was.
Mary always knew her timetable, if you want, a schedule. So, we knew with her not being home, something had gone wrong.
Helen's been missing for 4 hours.
Well, I was still hoping, against hope, that yes, perhaps she had been injured.
The officer that Mary spoke to at the police station in Liverpool was very accommodating and sympathetic, and said that she could ring him every hour from then on to check up with progress.
Mary was ringing on the hour, every hour, till 4 o'clock when the two police officers came out.
"22-year-old Helen McCourt has vanished on her way home from work.
I was in some fog, because all as I could think of is, where is Helen? I'm sat in the chair, looking over towards the window with the Venetian blind slightly open, and I seen a car pull up outside, and I thought, oh, they found her, she's home. And I rung to the door and the two officers come in and I said, "Where's Helen?" And they said, "Well, we've just come to ask some questions, Mrs. McCourt, you know." So they came in and I just thought, well, they're taking this seriously. Something must have happened to her.
This was really the start of the investigation becoming local, and another 5 hours later and there were police all over the place conducting inquiries.
We didn't know until the following morning. Michael phoned up and he said, Helen's missing.
You just can't take it in when it happens. You really can't take it in.
I was actually cursing her, to be honest. I was saying, for God's sake, Helen, you know, phone us and let us know where you are. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't do anything without telling Mary. Because her and Mary they were very, very close.
Helen's disappearance is so out of character that police immediately launch an appeal.
The news broke at 10 o'clock on the Wednesday. That went out on the radio. And obviously, once that went out, TV were out as well, you know, just a general report that girl was missing.
The facts were so strange. She'd contacted the mother to say, "I'm coming home, I'm going out." Her age, she was a bright girl. She knew what she was doing. And it was just so strange for her to go missing in that short distance between the bus stop and the home.
When you see it come on the news, you automatically think, this is real now, this is real.
And that's when I thought, wow, the police are moving quickly on this.
Away from the media, the police's investigation is well underway.
I know that the police, obviously, when they have an investigation like that, they start with the family and work outwards.
The serious crime squad are involved.
Well, there's no suspects for a missing from home. So you speak to the person reporting it, the family, the parents, the brothers, the sisters, the families, and see when they last saw them.
Obviously, I was interviewed, Frank was interviewed. You know, my movements. I do know that the police went to like my place of work, went with people I was working with that evening, because I worked overtime. You know, and that was disconcerting. Luckily, I've called into my ex-wife and my 2 sons home, so they knew what time I'd been there, they knew what time I'd left, you know, and travelled in time, so everything was covered.
The family are distraught. They don't know where Helen is, and they just wanted her found as quickly as possible.
Once the police had established that Helen had indeed completed her public transport journey, they then began to focus on the very short journey on foot she would have had to have made between the bus stop on Rainford Road and her home in Standish Avenue, which was only a 5-minute walk, even in bad weather.
The police retrace Helen's last movements.
She'd provisionally been seen near where she got off the bus in Billinge.
We knew it was serious, you know, when we realised how active the police were, you know. We could see them in the village. They were stopping traffic as well. You know, have you seen this girl handing posters out, etc.
As Billinge woke up on the Wednesday morning, the police operation was really beginning to ramp up. There were 120 officers in the town centre. They'd set up an operations centre at the old school hall. There were divers dispatched to look in Carmill Dam, and house-to-house inquiries were being conducted.
Well, the police had decided they were going to search every house and building.
One of the first premises they visited was the George and Dragon pub on Main Street, where they encountered a man called Ian Sims.
Landlord Ian Sims had taken over the pub a year earlier.
We didn't know the man really. Yes, we'd been in his pub 3 or 4 times, so we didn't know what his character was like or anything like that.
The pub was full of young people, and quite often he'd flirt with them. Helen wouldn't succumb to those flirtations. She just thought he was a bit of a silly old man.
He did start sending her drinks over, so I told the police that.
They thought he had a bit of a unhealthy interest in her. So after we spoke to the family that morning, we went down to the George and Dragon and saw the landlord in there and the manager in there. We started talking to them, asking them questions. Mr Davis, the SIO, was there. He wasn't happy with the way Sims was reacting to the questions. Did he know where Helen was? When did he last see her? Any idea where she was? And of course, all this he was saying, no, haven't seen her, don't know where she is.
He told them he was married, but he did have a girlfriend.
It was just a bit strange. You could see he was nervous. He was fidgeting. He was twitchy. You could see his Adam's apple was bobbing all over the place. He was very, very nervous. Mr Davis wasn't happy with them and told us to take him down to the police station for further interview. We then became suspicious about him, about his possible involvement in Helen's disappearance.
Statements are taken from Ian Sims, his girlfriend, and the pub manager.
When they then started going over their statements, they've seen there's a big difference in the landlord's statement to the barman's and the girlfriend's. Their recollection of the Tuesday evening was very similar, but his was totally different.
2 days before her disappearance, Helen had been in the George and Dragon pub.
The pub was a fun pub which were quite common at the time, so it attracted a lot of young people. In this area, that would be like the main place to go.
They used to have good parties down there, theme nights, stuff like that, discos.
If there was anything going on, she'd take a camera along, she'd take pictures of all the people.
I'd seen Ian Sims in the pub. She wasn't very enamoured with him. She didn't like his behaviour. He was married, he had a young mistress. On the Sunday, there'd been some sort of an altercation in the pub. There was some pictures being shown and someone had got upset about pictures being shown.
The girl had kicked off about the photos that Helen had of her previous boyfriend.
I think it had led to a bit of a scuffle in the ladies' toilets, and it resulted in them being told they'd been barred from the pub. She told me about it and I was very shocked because it just wasn't Helen to be getting into fights or situations like that. So it was so out of character to have been involved in that.
It's 48 hours after Helen's disappearance. The police are becoming more suspicious of Ian Sims.
It's a serious, it's not just an ordinary missing case now, it's a serious missing persons case because we suspect something bad has happened to Helen. So we're trying to get out of him as quickly as possible what he knew.
Around about the time that Helen alighted from the bus, a man later told police that he heard the sound of a high-pitched scream cut off abruptly coming from what seemed to be the rear door of the George and Dragon pub.
Well, we knew now that obviously he was becoming a suspect in the inquiry, and that we interviewed him again, and we told him that his girlfriend had given a completely different story about his movements that evening, and he eventually admitted that he told lies.
In the meantime, police began to focus on the George and Dragon, starting with the landlord's car, and it was then that they made their first big breakthrough, which was traces of blood and an opal and sapphire earring found in the boot of his Volkswagen Passat. When confronted with the information about the blood, Sims at first said that it must have belonged to his dog, which had cut its paw. But science was sufficiently advanced by 1988 for that swiftly to be dismissed.
2 officers, police officers, plainclothes, came and they showed me this plastic file, you know what you see forensic scientists and medical ones when they're taking samples and they put them in. And there was an earring in it. And they said, does this mean anything to you? And I just looked at it and I said, it's identical to Helen's earring.
And I know Mary asked him, do you think when do you think you'll find Helen? And his answer, we may never find her. I think we knew the worst had happened then.
They now began seriously to suspect Sims, and he was arrested on suspicion of murder.
The shock of realising what had happened to Helen, that she was no longer a missing person, and it was, a murder investigation.
Merseyside police have quickly responded to the disappearance of 22-year-old Helen McCourt. Despite no body being found, critical evidence has led them to arrest local man Ian Sims within a matter of days, on suspicion of murder.
It must have been devastating for Mary and the rest of her family to be informed by the police that they were now treating her disappearance as a murder.
When the police came to see me and inform me, it was a relief in a way. All I was thinking of is, I wanted Helen back, dead or alive. I wanted my child back.
Helen's family must have just been distraught, because I couldn't understand why he would want to murder Helen. You can't actually believe it. It takes a long, long time before the reality of that situation hits home.
If someone's run over and killed, you have to go and tell the family, that's bad enough. But to say that Helen has probably died a violent death.
Police are only able to arrest Sims on suspicion of murder. Now, they need to build the case to get their man.
Well, you can arrest someone on suspicion. The hard part then is trying to prove it, to gather the evidence to substantiate a charge.
Forensic inquiries then began to focus on Sims's flat above the George and Dragon. Very quickly, a number of blood traces were found. One in the flat itself had a fingerprint on top of it, which was later identified as Sims's. Fibres recovered from Helen's coat proved to be a perfect match for those found on the carpet of the George and Dragon pub. The forensic scientist Dr. Eric Moore said there was evidence that she had been dragged forcefully across the carpet.
The back of the earring was found, fibres off her coat. It all started getting to match.
Helen's disappearance had been given a great deal of media coverage, both locally, regionally and nationally. While the operations were continuing in Billinge, 15 miles away on the Manchester Ship Canal at Hollins Green, a man was walking his dog when he came across a bloodied towel. Walking a little further along, he found another towel and an almost complete set of men's clothing, including underwear.
When the clothing was found, part of the clothing was found to be promoting a beer that at the time was on sale in that pub in the George and Dragon.
Officers removed a bracelet and 2 rings from Sims, and mud was found on there, which matched the mud at the Hollins Green scene and also that found on the clothing.
20 miles away, a young boy notices something strange by the River Irwell.
He saw some bags stuffed down the banks of the Irwell. Looked like a handbag had just been thrown and burst open, and a denim jacket hanging in a tree. And when he comes to look inside the bag, took it back to his dad immediately saw an ID card with Helen McCourt on, and he said, "That's the missing girl."
In the pub, Sims kept a big dog, I think it was a Rottweiler, and he used to have it tied up with a piece of flex, electric wiring flex type thing. When the Helen's clothing were found in Earlham, they found the clothing and they found flex.
There were human hairs trapped in the knot in the electric flex, and it also had bite marks in it, which were matched with the teeth of Sims's dog.
Me and my partner, Jim Stevens, we went up to see the family. We wanted, it seemed strange at the time, but we needed to know, could we get any DNA samples? Hair, blood, anything, we should get her DNA details, because DNA was just coming in then, it was new.
Helen's dad, Billy, her brother Michael and mother Mary had all given samples themselves.
And we were looking then at taking a hairbrush, a pillow, and things like that, where we could get samples of her hair, and from where we got a DNA profile for Helen. They found her clothing and they found flecks, and mingled into it were pieces of hair. So when that was taken and examined, they found out that the hair matched Helen's hair from the DNA profiling, and that the flecks was the same type of flecks that was used to tie the dog up in the pub. We were able to tie the fact that Helen had been in the pub because they found fibres from the floor carpeting on her coat, linking Helen to the pub, to Sims clothing, and Sims to Helen's clothing. Overwhelming forensic evidence. So this was a major case where DNA played a crucial part in linking the murderer to the venue, to the victim.
The hairs removed from the flecks suggested that Helen had been strangled with it. Using considerable force, some of the hairs were broken and others were torn out at the roots. As the evidence began to build up, the police must have begun to realise that they had a very serious case on their hands. For Mary, it must have been absolute agony, and she was feeling so powerless at that time.
I just wanted her to be found, dead or alive.
With overwhelming forensic evidence, the pressure on the police to find Helen McCourt intensifies.
Police appealed for the public to come out and help in the search for Helen. This was now a murder inquiry, so people were made aware that they would be looking for a body.
We thought that only the family had turned up, but people were coming from everywhere, hundreds of people coming out to help, which I thought was absolutely fantastic.
A little over a year after Helen McCourt's disappearance, Ian Sims was in the dock at Liverpool Crown Court, and during a 3-week trial he continued flatly to deny that he was responsible for her murder.
He never looked as if he showed any remorse at all. You could see in his face he was just blank, as if, oh, I've done nothing wrong, and he just sat there and he just completely ignored everybody else. And that's the kind of attitude he had.
He was a very cold person. He obviously committed a murder. He wasn't admitting it, even though there was overwhelming forensic evidence linking him to the murder of Helen. And he was just sat there telling lies and not saying it wasn't him, having no consideration for the family.
It is very, very emotional. Plus the fact that with the courts that small, you're practically on top of his family as well.
I thought about his family, his wife, his mother, and his 2 little children. And I thought, I would rather be the mother of a murdered child than be the mother of a murderous killer.
Throughout the trial, Sims refuses to give any information about what he'd done with Helen's body.
I think it's the unreal situation that you're in. You don't know how to feel. It is very, very, obviously very emotional. But we're just wishing all the time we could get Helen back. And why will you not tell us? What have you done with her?
A jury returned a verdict after just 5.5 hours of deliberations following a 3-week trial, and it was an emphatic guilty verdict.
Ian Sims is sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 16 years.
When he stands up and says guilty.
When he was found guilty and I heard all this evidence was that, well, surely he'll tell me now. In fact, listening to all the evidence, it was overwhelming. It was both circumstantial as well as DNA.
The feeling of relief wasn't there. We were It was nice to know that he's been found guilty. We're great, but we couldn't put Helen anywhere. That's the hard part.
For years you try and understand or get some understanding of why, what possessed him to do this, and I just don't think you can get any reasoning out of it. I think he's just got a psychopathic mind and there is no reason or logic behind the actions.
There was cheering in the court, but it could only be a partial victory because Helen's body had still not been found, and that made it a very unusual case in British justice.
It was a very, very unusual murder investigation. It's the first conviction where the conviction's been based a large part on DNA without a body.
This murder case was a breakthrough one for DNA testing. It was in its relative infancy back in the 1980s, although it had been proved to be accurate to a degree. Statistically, it eliminated a lot of people. This was really the first time, though, that a conviction was secured mostly on this. There was a lot of other evidence, circumstantial, but the blood and the hair and other traces were certainly very significant in securing Sims's conviction.
And that's when you think, yes, you're proven guilty, why didn't you tell us now?
Ian Sims still doesn't tell the family where Helen's body is.
We can't see any sense in it, really, because it would have made his sentence shorter. Whether he's hiding something else, I don't know. But I just cannot grasp why he's served 31 years unnecessarily, in a way, with the evidence that there is. I've no qualms about calling him a murderer. And as the judge said, what you've done puts you in the first division of cold-blooded murderers.
Ian Sims has been found guilty of murdering 22-year-old Helen McCourt. Despite this, there are still questions to be answered.
We can only speculate as to what the motive was. Some say that it was just a row which escalated after she'd gone to the pub to smooth over the incident that had happened a couple of days earlier. It's also been speculated that she was threatening to expose his illicit affair, but there was no justification for what he did. I've covered a lot of murder cases since then and have never come across another one remotely like it. The sense of a lack of closure is still painful for the family. Mary feels that time is running out for her.
It's not just one person who's suffering, the parents, it's the whole family. They feel it. Everybody feels it.
It prevented our children from having a normal life. And they were at the age where, they were going out.
Helen's family continue searching for her remains.
The family are still out on a regular basis trying to find out what's happened to Helen.
You can't go for a walk, you can't take the dogs for a walk without looking at fields and thinking, she could be there.
She could be anywhere. She could be under that tree or by that fence. And that's the first thought that comes into your mind. It really is. It's frightening.
Even when the police were still searching, we were going down, can we help? They wouldn't actually let us search with them, but they say, can you search that field, or can you, go along that verge, or can you go along that, say, canal or brook, or things like that. And when they did eventually stop, we continued, I would say, practically every Sunday, not just up to the trial, for 3-4 years.
Sunday was marriage day. The whole family would get together, friends, and say to Mary, where do you want us to go this time? And she'd pick a particular place where she thinks she might be, and we'd go, get all the tools out, and go searching.
Very big searches, 30 to 40 people going out on a Sunday, clearing ditches, in canals, going into old quarries, clearing old mine shafts, things like that. We were doing very good methodical searches.
It's like now, if we heard the police have found a body, we automatically phone Mary up and say, a body's being found in such and such a place. You need to find out, it could be our Helen.
You automatically build yourself up. You get so deflated, it's unbelievable, knowing that it's not the person you're looking for. But then you start thinking, that's some other person's family, and they're going to be suffering. So you know what they're feeling like then.
Our Mary will never rest until Helen's found.
I can never come to terms with the fact that that I will ever be able to give Helen a burial.
In the family's churchyard, Mary has a commemorative bench.
It's a marble seat in Helen's name that her killer, he can prevent me from giving her a proper burial here, but he can't prevent me from having her name in the church graveyard, and it will be there for as long as the church and grounds are here. You see a lot of the people coming out and they nip over and they go onto her picture. God bless Helen, you know. So she's in people's minds all the time.
I feel it for Mary because she can't go and talk to Helen. I know she's got that bench outside the church. She can go and sit on that as if Helen's there, and that's it. But she can't go to a grave where a child's body is.
It goes on, and it affects everyone to a degree, and it impacts your life in a way that you just wish no one had to have their life impacted. Your trust in people goes.
Mary, her family and her friends continue to push for a change in the law with what they call Helen's Law.
Helen's Law is there to prevent killers from hiding their victims' bodies and putting their victims' families through hell. They ruin their lives. No body, no parole.
What we're asking for is a change in legislation that, till they cooperate with the authorities and say where the body is and it's recovered, that they are not liable for parole. Because without that body, it's just an ongoing trauma for the family.
Losing someone to murder is horrific enough. Not having a body and someone withholding that information for you is absolutely soul-destroying. I don't even know how someone can be seen to be remorseful if they're withholding that information. There's no compassion for the family. It's just a total controlling thing.
The yellow ribbons we put up now are for Helen's Law. And the amount of people in the street who've asked me, why are they up? Are they for Helen? And I just say, yes, get this law passed so that what's happened to us doesn't happen to everybody else.
I think that when we get Helen's Law, that will give me a certain amount of peace, because I will feel through her death has come about a better law where innocent families don't have to suffer wondering where their loved ones' remains are.
I'm sure she would have been a mother, probably even a grandmother by now. It's a big hole. It's still Helen's room upstairs. She'll always be around us. Long as we breathe, she'll be with us.
There are several victims in this case. There always are in murder cases, of course, not just the person who's been unlawfully killed. But one has to feel particularly sorry for Mary and for Brother Michael, who haven't been able to obtain this closure, and it's been an open wound for them.
She was loved by everyone. She really was.
I just hope and pray to God that she can be found and she can be put to rest in this graveyard. No one ever wants to bury a child. She deserves a proper, peaceful rest.